Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, people of all fandoms, welcome to the Ferret and Raccoon podcast episode 111. I am the Angry Raccoon, once again your only host for this podcast, and I'll be bringing you the last podcast of March, which is, considering what we have to talk about on this podcast, been quite fruitful to say the least. It's been a while since I've actually had to cut things that I wanted to talk about from the podcast or kind of, speak about them as just brief mentions. So, it's been pretty eventful over the last 2 weeks, or at least since podcast 110. Like I've already mentioned, I'm pretty much on my own for this podcast. I want to reassure long-term fans of the podcast that everyone who usually does appear on this podcast is present, alive, and well. It's just, scheduling, busyness. Everyone has their own lives and things to deal with. So, luckily enough, I have just enough time to do the podcast, and I'm doing it pretty early this morning. So, in case you're wondering why my voice sounds maybe different, it's that reason. Fun fact, your voice does sound different first thing in the morning compared to just before you go to bed. Trust me, test it out, record yourself, you'll be surprised. But yeah, let's get into what I've been up to over the last 2 weeks or so, other than kind of looking at the the political scale of this country and basically laughing at it. I got some stuff watched. First thing I want to talk about is I promised I was going to watch another anthology, specifically a horror anthology, and I did, and that is going to be the uniquely titled film Southbound. Yeah, this is from 2015, not to be confused with the many other things within media that's just titled Southbound. Now, this is a interesting anthology film because it is one of those films that tries to kind of tie everything together in terms of like transitions and have everything linked together. And I guess the main linking point, without spoiling too much of this film, is this kind of Silent Hill-esque highway, desert town road where no one can really seem to, let's say, find it or escape it, and it kind of seems to be like this weird nebulous void of things where I guess if you do something or are a part of something, things will kind of catch up to you. But the film kind of has, I'd say maybe about, I can't exactly remember, maybe 4 or 5 stories which all kind of link together, and the way they link together is just a case of, we're done with this character and now this character's coming in and now it's their story, and rinse and repeat, which does flow well. It does come off as very random, particularly given how the first short film is so short that I think it's less than 5 minutes, honestly, and by the time that ends, you're just introduced to the next characters who just stumble out of a room, and it's like, oh, okay, I guess we're done with those characters. But there is a reason, which I won't spoil, obviously. Overall, this is an okay film. There were a few things that bothered me. The one biggest issue is they didn't film it correctly. They used too wide of a lens for some shots, so a lot of the shots look very concaved. For anyone who does know about filming and photography, that is essentially when the edges or towards the edges of the screen start to curve in. I'm not sure what that's about, but it was very distracting, and it's very noticeable during kind of panning shots. And I have no idea what was going on there, because you'd think that with about 4 to 5 directors, they wouldn't all use the same equipment or would have a similar or a different style. But no, it kind of seems to be present in almost every single short. But it's okay. I think the third story is by far the best. It's very stress-inducing, and it's very freaky, and it's a really horrible and terrible situation, which kind of it kind of leaves you with a very, very nasty taste in your mouth, especially how it ends and how it links into the rest of the film and the, I guess, story straight after it. But overall, it's a decent film. I would say the second story and the second cast of characters are very annoying. If you can somehow just watch the third short, I would definitely go with that, and try and avoid any spoilers. Don't look it up, just try and watch it. If it's on Netflix, watch it then, but yeah, it's okay for the most part. The next thing I want to talk about is a TV series which I watched dating back from 1996, and that is Brass Eye. Now, this is a Channel 4 comedy series which essentially was kind of like a ludicrous mockery of media and I guess news presentation. They kind of don't do shows that Brass Eye is mocking, where it's essentially investigational, informative kind of news reports, like late night, oh, this is crime, this is stuff, reenactments of crimes and stuff like, I believe the BBC had a show, it was like Night Watch, something like Night Watch. If you look up Night Watch or any kind of shows that do that, it's essentially a parody of this, but a very farcical and almost nightmarish one, where a lot of the situations and a lot of the stuff they're suggesting is just downright insane for the most part. And the series each episode kind of follows one topic, being like animals, science, drugs, crime, decline, and there's a special which I won't say what it's about, mainly because it's quite a touchy subject, and also because it's quite interesting, especially soon as that special came out in 2001. But it's a pretty funny show. Like I said, it's very nightmarish in terms of how it's made. Like, for example, the transitional animations are so over the top and flashy and stupid, they make no sense. Like, just type in intro for Brass Eye and you'll probably see what I mean. But there are some, it's very interesting because a show like this probably wouldn't really exist now. I mean, I know there are people who do still kind of push the buttons in terms of comedy. Just look at things like Sacha Baron Cohen's Who is America, and just a lot of Sacha Baron Cohen's television work. This is kind of along the same lines as that, because Brass Eye does go about like making up fake companies and fake ideas and stuff. Like, for example, they came up with, within the animals episode, they came up with a story about an elephant who was so distressed it shoved its trunk up its butt. And they basically got a ton of celebrities who I think younger audiences probably wouldn't know who the hell they are, but they got popular celebrities at the time to basically, talk about the situation. They do it for, in a few other examples as well, which is quite funny, especially the series really has it out for Noel Edmonds, which is quite funny. For those of you who don't know, or for those of you younger audiences, Noel Edmonds was the guy who does Deal or No Deal. But yes, it's a very funny show, and it has some very funny and kind of quite quotable lines. Like, there are some great concepts. Like, one of my favorite concepts comes from the drugs episode, where the host of the show basically says, 1 out of 3 teenagers, or it says on the paper, 1 out of 3 teenagers is on drugs, and he basically says, that's not true, we proved it. And they basically explains that he took 20 15-year-olds and asked them if they were on drugs, but because they wanted to keep the identity of these 15-year-olds a secret, they basically how do I put this? They basically swapped out every 15-year-old with a 3-year-old, and there's a great scene where he's just going down a line of 3-year-olds going, "Are you on the smack? You on the horse? You on the crack?" And he's basically going, "I asked them about drugs. They didn't know anything. That's proof that teenagers are not on drugs." And it's stuff like that you actually see kind of actually happen in the media, and it does kind of poke fun at stuff like that. And I really did enjoy the series, despite the fact it's very nightmarish and ridiculous. And there are some very, not necessarily dark stuff in it, but there's some stuff where it's like, I can understand why it's rated 18 and why it was shown at like 11:05 back in the day, because there are some scenes, some very shocking scenes. Still, I would still say today, and I'd be very interested if anyone who is younger than me was born, let's say, after 2010. Well, you wouldn't necessarily be old enough to watch it. Whether they would still find the show enjoyable or would get it for the most part. Definitely let me know if you do kind of fit into that audience. Let me know at raccoonplusfriends.gmail.com, or leave a comment in the YouTube link. I'd really appreciate actually knowing whether this show holds up. And last thing I want to talk about, pretty fresh, so I will not be giving any spoilers on this, and that is Us, Jordan Peele's Us, which is following his directorial debut, Get Out. Been looking forward to this film since it got announced, the poster way back in 2017, and since the trailer came out, and I did see it. I saw it the day after it came out, and like I said, I'm not going to spoil anything, but rest assured, I will say it is a good film. I think it's a good film. I would ignore anyone who's saying it's not, only because I think too many people are going into it with the intention of it's going to be as good as Get Out, or I'm going to compare it to Get Out. I think that's quite unfair to some extent. I would recommend seeing it mainly because, one, it's an original film, two, it's coming from a pretty good director, and three, because what it's saying is pretty interesting and worth watching. So I would highly recommend Us. And yeah, I really don't want to spoil anything else. Yeah, just go see it. Yeah, that's all I can really say. And moving on to our next topic, let me get a sip of water because I am struggling once again. And yeah, so the first thing we're going to talk about is regarding the whole Fortnite. Well, shall we talk about the last fortnight? And one of the big things that definitely happened was the fact that James Gunn was rehired for Guardians of the Galaxy to obviously direct Guardians of the Galaxy 3. Now, what essentially happened way back in, I believe it was July or June, some point early last year, was I guess it was discovered or rediscovered by Disney or someone that James Gunn had made comments about some very touchy issues within today's society, mainly regarding sexual abuse, rape, and maybe some other stuff, despite the fact that that's kind of, those elements somewhat are prevalent in his films. Those were discovered, and I guess over those comments he was then fired and removed from, I guess, the Disney corporation, alumni, whatever you want to call it, which obviously was a bit saddening and definitely was, I think, a bit uncalled for in my opinion, because he made those comments a decade ago, and it's not as if he sat on TV and said, I agree with this, I agree with that. It was a comment in the form of a joke, in my opinion. I'm not saying what he said was correct, because you shouldn't really joke about that stuff. But at the same time, I think Disney did react a bit too fast. And it's interesting because I think the whole situation with James Gunn is that, you really... It's another example to really think before you tweet or comment on the internet. I mean, to some extent, I still think that people are way too sensitive and act and react way too fast. They overreact big time. People are just way too quick to call people sexist and racist and whatever thing without kind of really understanding it. You see a lot of the time, because a lot of the time, some comments that are made aren't what you think they are, and that the main problem with that is that a text or a tweet is very soulless. There's no characteristic, there's no tone in it, there's no real opinion coming out. You know what I mean? I could make a tweet saying, oh, Jordan Peele's Us is great, and someone can read that as me going, oh, Jordan Peele's Us is great, in a sarcastic manner. Some people could read it very plainly, some people could read it comedically. It's all about opinions and how exactly you read or read into, once again, a very soulless comment. But it's just a shame that society has become like so fragile towards opinions. It's quite ridiculous, honestly. People need a thicker skin, or just to kind of let it go. I mean, if what some celebrity said is keeping you up at night, then you really need to reevaluate your life for the most part. And I know that sounds very mean, but I'm a very I wouldn't say mean person. I would say I'm a very direct person. But yeah, it's odd. I mean, it's funny that one tweet can basically ruin your whole life. It's crazy that we've got to that in society. And I mean, James Gunn did apologize, which I kind of sneakingly think that was kind of like Disney trying to make an example out of him, maybe as some kind of like ego stroking, like, oh, you don't mess with Disney kind of thing, as we've kind of seen a few times in the past, which I'll get to. But I also think that Disney might have realized that Gunn isn't exactly hurting for money for the most part. I mean, he's producing Brightburn, which is the, I guess, Superman parody horror film, and as well as doing the Suicide Squad 2 / the reboot / remake. We're not really sure. I do believe it has been confirmed that they are basically doing another Suicide Squad film, but it's kind of going to be like a soft reboot maybe. I know quite a few people are getting recast. I believe Will Smith is getting recast, because I don't blame him. And yeah, so And also, I think that to Disney, they might have been a bit scared to the point of actually rehiring James Gunn because, let me put it this way, I mean, I really wouldn't want familiar talent that I've worked with, that I know, working for my rivals. You know what I mean? I wouldn't want that. So I kind of understand that from a business standpoint. But, Disney has a habit of, removing directors that, don't play by their rules for the most part. Once again, like, ego stroking alumni, rubbish, we're too powerful for this, we can do whatever we want, blah, 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 all that kind of stuff. I mean, they got rid of Lord and Miller, who were going to do the Han Solo film, and I remember when it happened, Kathleen Kennedy, who is Star Wars' pimp, she was talking all this, like, ill comments and, bad mouth about how Lord and Miller were destroying, as if they're destroying Han Solo, they're destroying the Star Wars franchise, But at the end of the day, removing Lord and Miller, and given that, there were so many issues with Han Solo, the film, no one watched it. I think only 7 people watched Han Solo at the end of the day. So I think they may have realized that, that probably wasn't a good idea, as well as Edgar Wright, who was originally going to direct Ant-Man. And I honestly still believe that if Edgar Wright had directed Ant-Man, we'd still be talking about Ant-Man, as opposed to no one talking about Ant-Man, because no one cares about Ant-Man. Ant-Man is probably one of the more forgettable films. And it's funny, because when you don't have a strong direction, your film really does fall apart, especially with Marvel films. I mean, I'm not going to throw too much shade, but, like, no one's really talking about Captain Marvel. And I'm just going to, throw that out there. No one's really talking, except for people who are trying to, push some kind of agenda, or, literally trying to get, like, some non-existent good boy points for going, oh, Captain Marvel's this, Captain Marvel's that. No. But yeah, it's, and besides, if they were to get some other guy to do Guardians of the Galaxy 3, people would know something was off straight away. So it probably was best that they actually got him back, actually got some gold instead of working with copper for the most part. One quick mention I do want to talk about, because I honestly don't really care, but I guess it's worth mentioning for the most part. And excuse me. And that is Google's Stadia. I think it's Stadia. Yeah, their new gaming console. I'll definitely put, like, some kind of link in the description, download link. Yeah, so Google's unveiling kind of a gaming console, which is mostly cloud/download based. And as far as I understand how it works, it's basically you kind of have this system or console, whatever the hell they're calling it, and as long as you have a stable internet connection, you can essentially play games, at, like, the best, graphic setting, quality, whatever you want to call it. The main issue I have with something like this is it's download only. I like physical. It's cloud based. I don't like the fact that the cloud could go down any moment, or the fact that basically Google owns my game library and can do whatever they want with it. They can lock me out of that if they want to. And also a stable internet connection. Like, from what I've heard, and from what I've heard from people, if your internet connection even just dips slightly, the game will just stop. Because this is a game console that is basically powered just on internet connection alone, which kind of works, but at the same time, your internet connection goes down, someone else is using their laptop in the other room and it slows it down. That's it, your gaming's done. And if there's one thing I know from actually playing online video games, is people flip the hell out when their connection starts to lag or goes down. So this is already kind of a dumb idea. Whether it will take off, I don't know. This is once again Google just trying to be everything and everyone. Google is trying to take over the world, much like Disney and Apple. Those are the 3 guys you got to be careful of. If one of those buys the other, that's it. We're probably done. But yeah, just wanted to mention that. Maybe other people know more about it. I honestly don't care. It's not interesting. Gaming is not in a great place right now. That's why we're not really talking about it. Yeah. feel free to chat about it in the comment section, I guess. But I'm going to move on to some news stories and topics, and we've got quite a few trailers to go down, and the first one is going to be Stranger Things Season 3. Netflix seems to be labeling it as just Stranger Things 3, which doesn't make any sense, given that they actually referred to Stranger Things Season 2. I don't know what that's about. Stupidness. But yeah, we got Stranger Things Season 3, and yeah, this trailer was kind of everything but the kitchen sink, which was very odd. They definitely didn't hold back, which is very strange. I mean, granted, this is the third season. We kind of know what to expect. I mean, I was expecting monsters in this series, but I would have appreciated them not showing one of the monster designs that much in the trailer. I would have rather liked to have seen it within the context of the season and actually go, oh wow, cool, it's threatening. Now I know what to expect, which is quite unfortunate. I thought it was a bit questionable that they were essentially getting Eleven, which is the girl, to use her powers for something so pointless like that. I mean, as far as I remember, using her powers does cause her some kind of like pain. So I was kind of like, that's a bit weird for the most part. But yeah, it's this was kind of a mixed bag in terms of what I'm seeing, because I'm really digging the use of color in this season, because the first two colors were understandably very dark, very drab. It was a very, we were dealing with a very dark and difficult subject matter. You know, things weren't quite right. So it makes complete sense to kind of like zap the color out in certain scenes. You know, we were going for more of a horror, creepy, you know, unsettling concept, which, you know, was kind of like a bit of an offset, given, you know, what most people think about with the 80s, which is, you know, bright, colorful, neon, you know, films, television, music, you know, that kind of stuff, which worked. But here they're kind of really embracing the color, which I like, and I guess that's to accompany the new setting, which is the mall, which at the time, especially within the time during the 80s, you know, late 80s, and given everything that happened during the late 80s, you know, it's a very good reference point, especially given that a lot of malls, especially at that time, can be seen as symbols of youth. For the most part, you know, they're also kind of seen as, you know, the rise of commercialization, the rise of I can't even say the word commercialism as well, you know, and it is quite interesting. I find it's a very referential and clever setting, because I can kind of tell that what they're going to do is they're going to definitely have some statements and commentary about how the mall is kind of like an organism, you know, to some extent, you know, an organism, a society, a smaller society, kind of like a social gathering. And I'm guessing when the monsters do attack, they're going to be a little bit more like outsiders, you know, foreign invaders, you know, possibly making connections and ties, you know, to actual current times during the 80s of like the Red Scare, you know, the assault on the West, and, you know, the attack or clash of pop culture, which I'm really hoping they're going to make reference to that. They definitely seem to have implied that, given some of the teaser trailers. I think them kind of coming at an approach with like the younger kids kind of, you know, wanting to, you know, enter, you know, grow up and kind of enter adulthood is quite interesting. I do like the idea of adulthood coming to an end, especially given how their childhood, you know, was so extreme, and how they, you know, to some extent wanted, especially in season 2, to return to, you know, just being kids, you know, just enjoying their life, you know, enjoying their youth. So I like that. And I do like the fact that, you know, quite a few of the slightly older characters are working in the mall. So that's going to obviously link up to some of the points and commentaries I made, which is quite good. And I'd imagine some of the characters, especially the, I can't remember his character name or the actor's name, but the older guy who you see towards the trailer, who's with the other kid, and they're kind of like, yeah, you know, kind of being a bit like nerdy. I kind of do hope that he's kind of going to be a little bit more of like a role model towards the boys. Like, you know, he's someone who's kind of been there and now he's working, you know, he's, you know, properly entered adulthood, you know, he's doing something, you know, and I do kind of hope that that might be something like that. If I'm completely wrong, then I'm going to be very disappointed in this season, because season 2 could have been a lot better, and the direction they're going in definitely seems like they're really going to try and focus a lot more on the actual characters, the actual world, as opposed to, let's say, the other world and, let's say, the paranormal horror threat, which could be a very interesting take. I am very interested in this series because it looks slightly different, but, you know, I'm not holding my breath. next thing I want to talk about, which is quite a big one. Excuse me, just had to get another drink there. Next one I want to talk about Toy Story 4. They finally dropped the trailer for Toy Story 4, which I haven't really been that interested in Toy Story, to be honest, for the most part. Especially this film. I mean, I'm not a big fan of the third film. I'm not saying Toy Story 3 is bad or anything. It's okay. It's just not as great as people say it is, to be honest. Toy Story 2 was a much more superior film. The only thing Toy Story 3 has over Toy Story 2 is the animation being just a bit better. And the animation does look much better in this film. I'm very impressed with the way the animation looks. But a lot of things are really troubling me about this film, especially in regards to the trailer. Now, I was always kind of against the idea of them doing a fourth film, mainly because they were saying, oh, it's going to be a love story between Woody and Bo Peep, which is very odd, because it's essentially them making up for the fact that they just forgot about Bo Peep. You know, straight up, they just forgot about her. So I guess, you know, an excuse to make another film for the most part. But yeah, I was very disappointed with this trailer, mainly because we're just doing Toy Story 2 again. And, you know, it's the same song and dance once again. I mean, you know, we've got to save Woody aspect, you know, Woody is lost once again. Woody considers staying, which I don't know. I'm just, I'm honestly just surprised that, like, no one is noticing this. I mean, okay, some people are noticing, but, like, I'm surprised no one's really questioning it or just going, yeah, they're just doing it again. They're literally doing the most sequel thing you could do, and I find that really disappointing. I mean, the one thing I will give this film, given some of the things with the plot points, the similarities in plot points, is that at least with this film, Woody has a lot more, like, conflicting reasons to stay this time, or, he has more reasons to, stay or reunite with the rest. I mean, which I like. He's got more options, there's more things to consider, which I think is a much better, kind of, way to go, as opposed to, I guess in the third film, him just being, oh yeah, I want to stay, actually no, we need to go, only because there was like one factor that, changed and differed his opinion. But, yeah, there are a lot of odd things in this film, which I definitely want to talk about, which not too many people are addressing. Some people are. And, one of the oddest things is there's a very brief clip you see of Andy, and he seems to be, redesigned. Andy as a young kid, that is, which a lot of people are people are questioning whether that's actually even Andy, because it doesn't look like him. Like, granted, what Andy looked like and what some of the character models looked like in the first two films weren't great. I understand that. They look outdated. To some people, they might look scary. I get that. But I don't understand why they've given him a Disney look. Like, he has really freakish eyes now, like Disney eyes. And it's very distracting because he doesn't look like a human. Especially not compared to the young girl who now looks after the toys. It's like, I don't know what, like something bad happened there. It's really distracting and very ugly to some extent. Not a big fan of that. Also, Bo Peep, who is in this film, her clothes have changed, which I found strange. And the reason I found strange is because I always thought she was just like a porcelain, like she was completely porcelain, including her clothes. So it's kind of strange to kind of have her change her clothes somehow. She somehow found slightly maybe modernish clothes, I guess. I don't know. It's very weird for the most part. I'll come back to Bo Peep in a bit. We do have some new characters. The newest character, or I guess is going to be the central plot point, is a character called Forky. Now, Forky is very annoying already. Like, his character got very old just within the very bloated trailer, and Disney either has very surprisingly enjoyable comic relief characters, or they have like painfully outdated characters. And I can tell this is probably not going to be a character that people really enjoy, because I noticed, I'd imagine he's probably going to be like, maybe like the meme character to some extent. I know maybe not necessarily, to that extent, but yeah, I have a feeling this is going to be the laugh out loud, your kids love this guy, buy the toy character. I don't see that his design is ugly, and I think his voice is awful for the most part. And one thing which I found was really questionable, which only a few people have kind of mentioned. Like I said, some people have, but yeah, Forky is going through an existential crisis, which is very concerning. Yeah, which I found very, I guess is an interesting idea. It was kind of, delved upon in the first film, but he also, like, unintentionally tries to kill himself. Because if you see in the trailer, he basically just jumps out of a moving truck, basically saying how, he's not a toy, he was meant for other things. Now, whether he knew that was going to kill him, I don't know. Whether that would have killed him, I don't know. But, yeah, people have lost their lives through means of not understanding who they are or what they're doing and, just throwing themselves out of places. That's something that has happened. People have gotten very confused and people have killed themselves over stuff like that. That's very dark to be putting in a Disney film, especially if you're going to try and say that that's like a comedic moment. I get it. It's not a comedic moment. I'm guessing, given that it's, taking place during a stormy night, it's meant to be a dark scene, but I don't think that's really appropriate to be putting in a Disney film. You can have characters have identity crises, but don't have possible depictions of suicide. That's how I'm reading it. It's not great. Yeah. I definitely wanted to raise that point. This film does look kind of dark. Like, the antique shop was very creepy. You have, like, this weird doll thing, which I guess is going to be the main villain, as we always have a main villain in these films. And I mean, we had, like, those ventriloquist dummies, which were just straight up horrible. They were like zombies chasing Woody, which I guess is kind of cool, but I'm also kind of going, people find those dummies, like, creepy anyway, so, like, that might frighten children. I mean, I thought it was cool, but it's very concerning at the same time. I mean, the film, to kind of go on some pros, the film does look, it does look wonderful. It does look very well animated. I'm liking a lot more variation in color and lighting. Toy Story 3 definitely was just a pretty film that didn't really have, like, a dynamic scheme for the most part. Everything kind of looked the same. It was very much like night and day. I can't remember a particularly interesting visual moment other than the last two final scenes, and I guess Ken's Barbie house, which, I guess was one of the more striking places. But there is definitely one shot where they kind of go into this place where it has, like, almost like a disco lighting, which I really liked. And I'm also really liking the kind of the contrast between, like, the antique shop being quite dark and dusty and very forgotten compared to the fun fair, which is very bright and, almost gives off, like, in comparison, like a futuristic, like, kind of look, like a hopeful vibe, if you get what I mean. Like, literally from the antique shop to the fun fair, we are looking at a brighter future, which I guess is probably what they're trying to reference for the most part, which I really do like. And I do enjoy that. And kind of speaking of, like, the fun fair in the antique shop, Bo Peep herself has, like, a very interesting situation, as a lost toy, because unlike, let's say, Woody and Buzz, he didn't really manage being lost, but Bo Peep has, managed to survive this whole time, especially given that, I guess, she has the threat of, like, that female doll and those ventriloquist dummies. She's survived pretty well for the most part and really adapted, almost to the point where it's perfectly understandable why she would want to stay. I mean, she has the best of both worlds to some extent. She has the hopefulness of, possibly being bought one day, and also, she gets to, view the future, children having fun, and, that's what toys are ultimately for, and that's kind of like their purpose in life, which I think, if they do it in a right way, could be a very interesting and nice, point for an inanimate object to kind of have that kind of logical thinking, which I do like. That's, possibly a testament to some interesting writing for the most part. But yeah, it's interesting. Speaking of interesting concepts, I guess this film also does confirm that children essentially have the power to bring anything to life as long as they consider it a toy. Forky being an example. I mean, all they really have to do is, add some kind of item to an already existing object or just create something, and that immediately gives it life as long as they regard it as a toy. I mean, Forky was a plastic fork until he got like literally, eyes and straw hands and that, and he came to life. It does raise some questions as to at what point do children stop being able to create life. Are there children who can't bring toys to life? You know what I mean? Deep stuff right here. I know they're not going to go into it, but it definitely is a concept that can be its own film. Although I know they have, there are ideas about how like children can see ghosts and demons and how they can bring things to life. That's throughout culture, so that makes sense. I'm not trying to, blow anyone's mind here. I'm pretty sure we're all thinking the same thing. I just wanted to really highlight that fact that Disney have confirmed that that's something that happens within their films. Last thing I want to mention is the fact that Keegan-Michael Key and Jordan Peele are going to be in this film playing two characters, Ducky and Bunny, who I guess are going to be funfair stuffed toys you can win. This is pretty funny because, Jordan, Keegan and Jordan both had a TV series, Key and Peele, back in the day, where they basically played various characters. I'd imagine much like in Finding Dory, where they had the two actors from The Wire, I guess, kind of pseudo reprise their roles. Is going to be something very similar, which I'm pretty happy about, and more on them too later. But yeah, I don't know. I probably won't be watching Toy Story 4 in the cinemas. There's no real rush. I know it's going to do well. I'm just kind of interested to see how people are going to react to, I guess, some of the points I've raised, some of the more concerning points, like Andy's redesign and Forky possibly killing himself. Like, do you guys think that that's technically suicide? Because I think it is. Do you think it's dark? I mean, let me know. Email me at raccoonplusfriends@gmail.com. Leave a comment. You can hit me up on my Twitter. That's Raccoon Angry. One C in the raccoon. I'd really like to know what other people are thinking, because I think it's something that maybe people aren't talking about as much. Is it overreaction? I don't think I'm overreacting. I think that's a fair, criticism. I don't know. Let's move on to our second to last trailer, and that is going to be Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. This is just a teaser trailer, so there isn't too much to talk about for the most part on this trailer, but it's more just the fact and my hopes of what this film could actually be. Obviously, this is Quentin Tarantino's 9th film. Quentin Tarantino, one of the more popular, controversial, out there directors of, I guess, mine, yours generation. And his next film, which I've been really looking forward to, and it's interesting because it's going to be, I guess, an industry study about how Hollywood or the film industry works, as well as it changing at the time, which does have me very curious as to whether it's going to be a, kind of like a love letter to the art or the behind the scenes of the production of like cinema during that time, or whether it's basically going to be Quentin Tarantino putting up a middle finger to how messed up things can be. That kind of stuff I'm very interested in. Leonardo DiCaprio and Brad Pitt is a very interesting pairing, which I don't know if they've ever been this close within a role. It's very interesting because they're quite prolific actors, very well known. And I'm kind of surprised Brad Pitt is even in a Quentin Tarantino film. Granted, this film doesn't look like it's going to have a lot of like blood and gore in it. I mean, maybe there will be some scenes where maybe one of the actors is in a horror film, or they kind of address horror films and kind of like how they go into like making the blood, making the gore, that kind of stuff. But I think it's very interesting, the pairing, and obviously Margot Robbie is in it. I don't know what character she's in. I'm kind of going to keep that as a surprise to me. Who knows who she's playing? It should be very interesting. And I'm kind of hoping that this film explores concepts like identity crisis, because, Brad Pitt is playing a stunt double for Leonardo DiCaprio, which is quite interesting, and stunt doubles are often some of the more unsung heroes of, like, the acting aspect, production aspect of, big blockbuster Hollywood films. So it should be interesting to hear his point of view, and should be very interesting to see how their relationship affects certain situations like being in the film, and like ego and personality, because they claim to be best friends in this film from what I've read, so we'll actually see if they do stay the best of friends for the most part. I want to see it definitely deal with like stress and depression caused by success. That would be an interesting kind of topic to go by, as well as like how the industry does treat actors, especially like, struggling actors, as well as like actors who are like, no longer as big as they were, because much like a lot of industries like the music industry, once you're no longer the big thing, they kind of like toss you to the side. It happens way more nowadays in the music industry, and you probably noticed that there are a lot of how I say it, female artists, unfortunately, who don't get as much attraction and push anymore because they've gotten a little older, which really isn't fair, because I hate how age unfortunately is such a big factor. And I think a lot of actors and a lot of like musicians, artists really got to be prepared that unfortunately people judge you way too much on your age. And I would love to see the film definitely tackle issues like that. Because it makes complete sense. It's all part of Hollywood. Hollywood has, not always, but like, it is a very corrupt and very fine line industry where, once again, like I was talking about with James Gunn, and that you only got to do one thing and that's it. You're done. There's some people who have never escaped from that one mistake they've made. Very few get out of it, but some, like, just look at Mel Gibson. Some of the stuff he said on that, call, granted it was somewhat taken out of context, but, the guy is, he's not where he used to be for the most part. He doesn't have anything like Toy Story, like Tim Allen and Tom Hanks, where it's like, that's a fat paycheck. They only got to do that a couple times and, they're set for life. Mel Gibson doesn't really have anything like that. But I'm very interested in this film. We didn't get enough in this trailer, I felt, which is fine because it's a teaser trailer. I'd rather not be spoiled. I'd rather just kind of get a proof of concept. And from what I was seeing, I definitely did like the way the film was going about. I liked how the aesthetic of the film was kind of being presented. I'm kind of surprised that he's maybe not using more traditional of-the-time cameras for maybe some of the older scenes. I get that. You want the film to look nice, but I think if you're definitely going to do these like fake TV shows scenes or movie clips, definitely like at least try and maybe shoot on something that looks like film, or maybe for like documentary behind the scenes stuff, filming at the time, maybe actually film it on film, get an expert for that. That would really help the film look as effective and as accurate as possible. I know Quentin Tarantino can do that. I believe The Hateful Eight was like, I know one of his films was actually shot on film or something like that. It was shot like on a particular film or presented in some certain way. So I don't doubt that for a second, but everything just looked kind of the same, and the black and white shots, like I said, looked like they were just converted, post. But, and the one thing I will end is I did really like that shot towards the end when Leonardo DiCaprio was kind of doing that shot dressed as the cowboy, whoever he is, and the girl just kind of comes from his whisper. He's like, "That is the best acting I've ever seen in my life." And he's like, "Well, thank you, dear." And he's definitely like really kind of let that sink into his ego, and he's like, "Yeah, I'm the best." I like stuff like that. It may be also kind of it might also be Leonardo DiCaprio himself maybe poking fun at himself or his performance. Maybe that's why he was cast as this brilliant actor to play a brilliant actor who thinks he's the best thing ever. That would be some pretty funny meta commentary, or meta character acting, or whatever you call it. I don't know, what's the term for that? I don't know. But yeah, really looking forward to this film. It's not too long, so we'd probably see another trailer come out very soon. Probably won't be covering it, but I'm definitely wanting to see it. I've seen almost every Quentin Tarantino films. Yeah, I think I've seen them all. So yeah, looking forward to this one. It's definitely a very interesting change for him. It doesn't seem, once again, like it's very exploitative or violent. I don't think anyone's going to be saying the N-word in this film. Well, except for maybe Quentin Tarantino. But yeah, moving on to our last trailer, which only really has to be a mention, and it's a mention for two reasons. The first being that it's incredibly short. It's about 40 seconds long, and the second reason is because I want to do a discussion on it very much later on in the year with a particular person, and that trailer is going to be for Alien, the 40th anniversary shorts, the official teaser trailer, which is essentially a extremely short trailer, basically announcing and confirming the fact that a bunch of directors have done a bunch of shorts based on Ridley Scott's 1979 classic Alien, which I think is a fantastic idea. This is what I would rather have as opposed to Prometheus and Alien Covenant. Fresh ideas, fresh directors, fresh everything, Give it to someone else. Ridley Scott doesn't know what the hell he is doing with the Alien franchise. Have you watched Prometheus? Have you watched Alien Covenant? They're a mess. Unfortunately, I don't know what's going on in Ridley Scott's mind, but he might have gone a bit senile, unfortunately. I mean, let me put it this way. When you're saying dumb stuff like, oh, Jesus Christ was an engineer, and the reason why the engineers don't like humankind is because humans killed Jesus, you need to stop. Not because I'm a hardcore Christian and don't believe in that stuff, but because it's nonsense and you're pulling that out of your, what. But yeah, this is what we need. We need actual people who actually are passionate, want to tell their own stories within this very interesting universe. I mean, everything other than Alien and Aliens has been fantastic. I'm talking about some of the games like, Alien Isolation, Alien Infestation, some of the comics, some of the stories they have produced over the 40 years that Alien has existed has been truly fantastic. I mean, granted, look up some of the comics, look up some of the games that have come out. They are downright better than unfortunately most of the movies. Whether these shorts will be good, I don't know. It depends on how long it depends on if it's going to be like as an anthology film or it's going to be as a, hey, we're going to release a a short every month or every whatever to the lead up to the original release date of Alien. I don't know, but I'm really interested in this and I'm really happy that they're doing something like this. I wish more people would do this. I know they did something very similar with the new Blade Runner film. They had a few shorts came out. Most of the shorts were rubbish apart from the one that was an anime. But yeah, I wish more people would do this. It's kind of promotion, but once again, I'd rather have this than another Ridley Scott film where he's just talking absolute nonsense. The man can't write a prequel. I don't even think the man can even make a film, personally. I don't want that man anywhere near like a film camera, simply put. But yeah, that's pretty much going to be the podcast. No discussion, because like I said, I am going to push the discussion I was going to have this week to a much later date for the most part. And I guess I'm going to leave you with the video of the episode, which is going to be Non-Scary Movie by Key and Peele. For those of you who don't know, Key and Peele, it was a comedy series from 2012 to 2015, starring Keegan-Michael Key and Jordan Peele. This is what Jordan Peele was doing before he came up with the film for Get Out and I guess Us. And the very interesting thing about this particular clip, within the context of the link I've sent you, is that this clip was actually uploaded on March the 21st, the release date of Us. So the YouTube channel Key and Peele basically uploaded this as like a very soft promotion for the film Us, which I thought was a really nice thing to do. And also it's kind of very funny within the context of the fact that the guy who directed Get Out and Us is in this short talking about non-scary horror films. I won't ruin the sketch or the jokes in this, but it's pretty funny because I've witnessed experiences like this, and I've been I've been like this in terms of what happens in the sketch. So I wanted to leave you with this. Definitely go and see Us as soon as you can if you're old enough. It is definitely a film worth watching. If you want to hit me up, chat to me about anything. I'm not very responsive on Twitter right now because I'm kind of sorting it out. My Twitter is a mess, much like all of Twitter. You can hit me up at The Angry Raccoon, only one C in raccoon. And of course, you can email me and us at raccoonplusfriends.gmail.com. Everything I've talked about will be linked in the description as a download link, which will be as part of the Twitter link for the most part. And I guess there isn't really anything else to add for the moment. I don't think there is anything to add. Yeah, I guess we'll leave it on that note. Hopefully next week won't be as crazy. Hopefully there will be some interesting stuff. Still waiting for that Sonic the Hedgehog trailer. I know it's coming, and when I know it's going to be bad. That's all I'm going to say for the most part, and I think I'll leave it on that note. I'll end this podcast like I always do by saying I was the Angry Raccoon, or the Angry Raccoon. Sorry, I still can't speak, it's early. And I will see you on the next podcast.